What a win down in Miami for the Chargers, winning 29-27. Justin Herbert is Superman. 46 seconds to go, avoids a sack, hits Ladd McConkey, gets to about the 17-yard line, sets it up for Cam Diker's game-winning field goal. That win was not pretty, but it was needed. It was definitely a must-win game for the Chargers, coming off a 2-game skid. That game is the difference between 4-2 and 4-0 in the AFC. Compared to being 3-3 at 500, Denver would have taken the lead in the AFC West, but the Chargers found a way to win down in Miami, beating the Dolphins on a game-winning field goal. We're going to go through all the stats. We're going to go through some of the film. We're going to go through PFF grades in this episode, so be sure to stick around until the end to get through all of the analysis of yesterday's game against the Dolphins. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, follow me on socials. I am at Electric Edge Pod on TikTok, Instagram, and X. So be sure to check out those socials and connect with me there. So we have a lot to go through in this episode. Like I said, this was a must-win game for the Chargers, I believe. So we're going to break it all down right now. So as I mentioned, Chargers won 29-27. This game was interesting in the fact that the first half was somewhat controlled by the Dolphins. Going into halftime, we didn't have the lead. Third quarter, we came out all cylinders firing. I think we went up 26-13 at one point. And then the Dolphins started to creep their way back in, taking the lead with, I believe, a minute left in the fourth quarter, which sets up Herbert being able to construct the game-winning drive. Now, that game-winning drive doesn't get constructed without Nyheim Hines' kickoff return to the 40. Great return. I think he set up at the 40-yard line. And 2 plays later, the Chargers get down the field into Dolphins territory underneath the 20, which sets up that Cam Diker field goal. So let's jump into the overall box score real quick of this game. All right, so Herbert, Jim Harbaugh said he's Hercules, and I couldn't agree more with that statement. I don't think many quarterbacks in this league do what he did on that last drive. And, all the talk about Justin Herbert not being clutch is just nonsense. I think he's had 18 game-winning drives since 2020. The only person that's ahead of him right now is Mahomes. So I don't want to hear any of the nonsense. He's not clutch. He can't will the Chargers to win. The Chargers don't win that game without Justin Herbert yesterday, without a doubt. And we'll go through this film towards the end of this episode, but he evades 2 defenders who get beat off the right side. Jalen Phillips has him wrapped up. He somehow gets out of the tackle, switches hands to throw so the ball doesn't get hit and fumbled out, and then hits Ladd McConkey, and McConkey stops on a dime, goes the other way, and goes up the field and sets up that field goal. So just insane play by Justin Herbert. That's the play Chargers fans are used to seeing with him, but it's about time that the rest of the league gets to see what we see on a week-to-week basis. So let's jump into these stats real quick. So Justin Herbert was 29-38 yesterday, 264 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He only had 1 sack, and I'm going to credit Greg Roman with the game plan. A lot of quick passes, nothing really down the field yesterday. We utilized the run game, which I've talked about getting that going, and Kamani Vidal stepped up in a big way yesterday, rushing for 124 yards. We'll touch on him in a minute. But only 1 sack, kept him upright for the most part of the game, and he finished with a quarterback rating of 112.2. So Kamani Vidal, he got his shot to start, and he came through. 18 carries, 124 yards, rushing. He had that long run of 38 yards, which will show on the film. He also had a couple of catches out of the backfield. He had 3 receptions for 14 yards and a touchdown to go up 26-13 against the Dolphins. The news came out yesterday that Omarion Hampton may be out more than the initial 4 games, so it's going to be imperative for him to continue to be dominant in this run game. It'll be interesting to see as well if the Chargers do look for another running back. I think they have to. You can't just rely on these 2 left. Plus, I think there's one other running back on the practice squad right now. I think you need to find another running back to add into this mix until Hampton comes back. But Kamani Vidal, he got his opportunity and he balled out yesterday. We don't win without him being dominant in the run game. And like I said, I did not want Herbert to be the leading back this week, and he wasn't. He had 1 carry for 2 yards. Kamani Vidal really took on that load and came through for the Chargers on offense. I mean, let's talk about our receiving core. Ladd McConkey led the charge. Quentin Johnson was out. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. Prior to the game starting yesterday, I think QJ was working out with one of the strength and conditioning coaches prior to the game, and it was determined he could not suit up. So Ladd McConkey, this was what we've seen last year from him. He had 7 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. And like I said, that long reception of 42 yards to seal the deal for the Chargers. Oronde Gadsden, yes, he had a fumble yesterday, but he played very well. He had 7 catches for 68 yards. That's the most he's had in his young career so far. I'm also sure that Conklin, besides any run blocking, didn't really have any impact in the offense yesterday. So this is good signs for Oronde Gadsden. And like I've said in prior episodes, I am super high on him. He was initially a wide receiver, turned tight end. He had that fumble early yesterday, but that didn't stop him. He just kind of rebounded from it and finished with a very good game yesterday. Keenan Allen was 4 of 27. Also, Trey Harris. Trey Harris had a couple big blocks in the run game, and his PFF grades reflected that. You know, Trey Harris, he's done a great job so far this season with blocking, and it's shown on tape. It's shown, I believe, during the Denver game, he's had some good blocks. I think last week he had some good blocks, but this week as well. So even though he's not being fully utilized in the passing game, he's doing his job when it comes to run block. Like I mentioned, Kamani Vidal had those 3 catches for 14 yards. And he had that touchdown. So that play was the same play they tried to run in that 4th and 2 against Washington where Hampton sprains his ankle. If Hampton doesn't get tripped last week on that 4th and 2, he catches that ball and it's a first down. This week, Kamani Vidal doesn't trip, and Justin Herbert didn't have to look to a tight end to throw to. He catches that ball and goes in for the touchdown. On to the Dolphins side of the house. Tua was 21 of 32, 205 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 picks. First pick of the game was tipped. Tony Jefferson intercepted it. His second pick, St. Juste, which is his first pick of this season. I think he's only had 2 picks in his career. St. Juste jumps the route, intercepts that ball. And then the third pick was at the end of the game, 5 seconds to go. Tua just throws the ball and Derwin James picks it off. Just pretty wild. Tua had 2 sacks yesterday. Quarterback rating of 54.8. Like I mentioned in my last episode about the Dolphins run game, I said A-Chain's going to run all over you, and he did. He had 16 carries for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is something that the Chargers definitely need to address going into the game against Indy because it doesn't get easier with Jonathan Taylor, and also Daniel Jones can use his legs. But he ran all over us. That was the bulk of their offense yesterday for the Dolphins. As far as receiving, Jayden Waddle was their lead receiver. He had an insane catch, falling down to the ground, bobbling it, and maintaining possession. He finished 6 catches for 95 yards. Darren Waller had only 2 catches yesterday for 12 yards. He had that touchdown late in the 4th quarter. Pretty surprised that they didn't include Waller more often in that passing game. He's been a big target for 2 of the past couple weeks, but not sure what the Dolphins' game plan was. All right, let's talk about team stats from yesterday. Total yards, the Chargers had 403 yards compared to the Dolphins' 341. They had 10 drives. They outrushed the Dolphins as well, 140 to 137. The penalties got somewhat corrected yesterday. They had 7 penalties for 45 yards. That's a lot better than giving up 100 yards in penalties the past 2 weeks, but still needs to get cleaned up. There was 2 back-to-back false starts in 1 drive. Stuff like that needs to be cleaned up. But it's good to see that the Chargers had under 50 yards of penalty, under 50 yards of penalty yards yesterday. And they also won the turnover battle. The Dolphins had 3 turnovers. The Chargers had 1. Different story compared to the prior 2 weeks where there's multiple turnovers by the Chargers. So it's good to see that got cleaned up as well. And then time possession, the Chargers dominated 34 minutes to 25 minutes. I thought it was a much better offensive game for the Chargers yesterday. Defensively, the run defense needs to get cleaned up. I thought we did a better job on the pass rush. Odafe Owe got his first sack of the year and first sack with the Chargers yesterday, which I'll pull up that film as well. But I thought it was a much better game. But the Chargers in the second half, offense clicked, defense fell apart. We need to find ways for next week to clean that up, especially like I've mentioned on the run defense. Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Jones will run all over us next week if we don't tighten that up. But luckily, we should get Denzel Perryman back next week for Indy, and I believe Khalil Mack comes off the IR, and his 21-day window will start to open. So it'll be good to have him back as well, hopefully to fix this run defense. And just before I move on to going through PFF grades, the Chargers need to fix their red zone offense. I think Dan Popper put out a stat they were 5 of 16 in red zone scoring opportunities this year. We settled for 5 field goals yesterday. Now, luckily, we have a kicker that is accurate and can make them, but we cannot continue to settle for field goals. Derwin James put out a quote that we should have blown them out, and he's 1,000,000% right. Imagine those field goals were touchdowns, right? Much different game. Doesn't come down to the wire. I don't know what Greg Roman needs to do, but he needs to figure out how to get the ball into the end zone. I really like that play where Kamani Vidal scores. He comes out to the side, quick short pass, goes into the end zone. I don't know what the Chargers need to do, but they need to figure out how to get the ball into the end zone and stop settling for field goals. This will happen week after week where games come down to the wire because you can't finish drives with a touchdown instead of a field goal. Has to get cleaned up. So hopefully they work on that in practice this week and we see different outcomes going into the game against Indy next week. So let's go through some PFF grades from this game. So this is just total offense yesterday for the Chargers. So our top 5 is Ladd McConkey, which should come to no surprise. Trey Harris is number 2 at 68.9. And right here, this run block is the reason why it's so high. Like I said, he's done a great job being a blocker in the run game this year. I'm very impressed. Hassan Haskins is 3, same deal. His pass block grade was 81.7, and his run block was 72.8. So even though he wasn't very productive when he had the ball, he did the little things that set them up for success yesterday. Justin Herbert at 4 at 66. And then Kamani Vidal rounds up that top 5 with his performance yesterday. But, I mean, if you look at the bottom here, Mekhi Becton did not have a great game yesterday. His run block was 34.9. He got beat in that play where Herbert evades a sack and throws McConkey. He got beat, and Bobby Hart got beat on the same play. Bobby Hart, which, the guy hasn't started a game since 2021, finishes in the bottom. Our friend Bradley Bozen finishes at 14 with 49.3. And our best offensive lineman, once again, this game was Zion. Zion's pass block was 77.2. So, he's been a bright spot in this revolving door of an offensive line. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball real quick. So our top 5 is Ben St. Juste at 82.3. I mean, he had a 90 rating on coverage, which he got that pick. Tony Jefferson at 74.6. Bud Dupree at 72.1. Derwin James at 71.7. And Elijah Molden at 71.5. And this is overall grading for defense, but this is a little misleading because you have Oweh finishing last. But if I go to pass rush, he finishes in the top 5. Same thing with Thule. He got some pressures on the quarterback, but his overall is low. So I want to pull up this pass rush defense real quick because I think this is more indicative of a correct score. So if you look here, Dafe Oweh finishes 3rd in pass rush grades. Thule finishes 2nd. Right? John Caldwell had a great game in the pass rush. Run defense, not so much. And this is where it hurts. Right? Bud Dupree finishes at 72.9. Justin Aboybe finishes at 70. Tier Tart 67.7. Cam Hart at 66.4. Enter Heapstill at 65.9. Regardless, the run defense yesterday, it was the Achilles heel for the Chargers. Just could not stop Evan A-Chain at all. And like I said, this has been a recurring theme the past couple weeks with you had Krosky Merritt last week and Jaden Daniels, and then Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo the prior week. Just could not stop the run game. And let's even go back to the Denver game. I mean, J.K. Dobbins almost had 100 yards rushing against them. So this is something that needs to be addressed. Hopefully, as we get a little more healthy on defense too, this resolves itself. But definitely need a game plan going into Indy to fix this run defense. But overall from yesterday, look at grades, look at stats. I thought the Chargers did a much better job with how they constructed their offense, keeping Herbert upright. There's a lot of sets where they had 2 tight ends or 3 tight end sets, which I think helped, especially the left tackle and right tackle. Decalis and Hart takes some of the pressure off them. Let's hope that it's the same type of strategy going into Indy. Indy's defense is very good as well. But let's go through some film from yesterday and some key plays that I wanted to touch on to actually see this stuff in action. All right, so let's pull up this first run here. Kamani Vidal's big run. All right, so let's pull up the end zone shot. Okay. So right here, we have two tight ends in. We have Tucker Fisk and Will Dissly coming in. Trey Harris is in, and KLS. Trey Harris is going to be part of the blocking on this play. Right, so Kamani Vidal. Right, Trey Harris gets out right here, blocks this guy, opens up this wide gap, and Vidal goes up the field. That's for 38 yards. Okay, so this is another run by Vidal for 19 yards. So in this package, they brought out just one tight end. They had three wide receivers, Trey Harris, Ladd, and KLS. So Trey Harris is motioning. He's going to come seal this edge guy right here. Right? Okay, hole's blocked off. Kamani bounces to the outside, breaks a tackle, and gets upfield. So same thing. Another good block by Trey Harris. Okay. So this is a longer pass yesterday. This was in the third quarter. This was 16 yards to McConkey. So this is interesting too, because a lot of passes yesterday were quick passes. So Herbert doesn't get the pressure. So they have two tight ends in. They have Fisk and Gatson in, and they have two wide receiver set of Trey Harris and Ladd here. So they have McConkey in motion. Right, so the Dolphins bring 5. Right, play action. And then Ladd's open right in the middle of the field. Boom. Right, and last week we saw in the film that the Commanders brought a lot of just 4-man pressures and they couldn't contain it. This week I've seen a lot of 5, and because they've added the extra tight end or 2 tight ends, they were able to pick up those blocks. All right, let's pull up this Odafe sack real quick. All right, so this is his first sack of the year. He had 0 with the Ravens last year. He had 10 sacks with the Ravens. So let's look at this here. All right, so the Chargers bring 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Odafe's following Tua, breaks that block, and wraps him up. And that's something that we need, especially Tuli's playing well. Now you have someone on the other side of the ball that can help as well until Matt gets back. So great job on him. So let's pull up some Herbert film as well. I want to pull up the last 2 plays of the game. So the Chargers couldn't, in their formations, right? So they have 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end, right? So they don't have the extra blockers in for Herbert on these last 2 plays. Right? Okay. They have Haskins in the backfield. All right. The Dolphins rush 4, right? This defender holds. Right, so he got beat. I think that is, let's go back. I think it's Zion that gets beat. Nope, it's Bradley Bozeman. Bradley Bozeman once again. Right? Bozeman. This guy just cuts to the inside. And now the pressure's coming to Herbert. Stays on his feet and gets the ball just back to the line of scrimmage to hit McConkey. Okay, next play. Same set. We have 3 receivers, 1 tight end. Okay, same deal. Haskins in the backfield. Gatson motions. Okay, the Dolphins rush 1, 2, 3, 4. And Becton and Hart are going to get beat here, right? They both get beat. Herbert steps up. And then this is where Jalen Phillips has him wrapped. Switches hands. Gets the ball out. And that seals the game for the Chargers. But like I said, watching the game, I thought the offense did a much better job this week. I'm hoping this continues in the next week. Find ways to keep Herbert upright. Weather the storm. All could potentially be back next week as well. Trey Pipkins was out this week. He could be back next week. We can have that initial starting 5 and offensive line that we had against Kansas City and the Raiders. So I'm hoping we can get a little bit healthier this week in practice and come out with a lot more firepower against Indy, which is going to be a very tough game. The Chargers are going to have to do little things. Once again, they're going to have to score when they're in the red zone, limit penalties, stop the run game, and we'll go through that in my upcoming episode talking about that matchup next Sunday at SoFi. But like I said, must-win game for the Chargers. They came through with a win. They're 4-0 in the AFC, which is going to help with playoff implications. Hopefully, we can roll to 5-0 in the AFC next week with a win against Indy. And even with all the turmoil that's around this team, with all the injuries, they're still first in the AFC West. So that is pretty awesome. Now it's up to them to keep it rolling. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you thought about this game, what you thought went well, what you thought didn't go well, what you're looking forward to heading into next week against Indy, and then just any general thoughts about this matchup versus Miami. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear from Chargers fans, as always. If you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe to the Coach Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow me on social medias at Electric Edge Pod. Great win for the Chargers. Let's keep it rolling. Us Charger fans deal with a lot. There's a lot of ups and downs in that game yesterday, but it was good to end on a positive note. So with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Look forward to hearing from you. So as always, go Chargers and bolt up.